Yeah, welcome to Conversation. A pleasure to welcome to the program two people who have been very involved in the recently completed Left Forum 2014, right across the street from where we're talking now. We're at Manhattan Neighborhood Network at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. It was overwhelmingly successful, and we're going to be talking some about that and some continuing activity along the lines that characterize the conference. And on my immediate left is Seth Adler, and he's the convention coordinator for the event, and is working, I guess, with Stanley Aronowitz and some of the other people in organizing this. And on my across from me is Ashley Abbott, and she's the volunteer coordinator for the Left Forum.
Yes. And
he is the coordinator for the Left Forum. And welcome very, very much to Conversations. It's really nice to welcome you to that,
Thank you.
Hear. We've talked before, just before the conference was actually called. Maybe it's worthwhile for the audience viewing. It really came off well. It was done at the end of June, wasn't it, that it was?
Well,
and it came off well. It came off, you had a great number of people. Maybe you can do a reprise of how successful it was, or what was the outcome of the conference called this year at John Jay.
Harold, you and I have both followed the history of the Left Forum and its precursor, the Socialist Scholars, for many decades now. Yeah. This is the Left Forum's 10th year in a yearly conference that's produced that brings thousands of people out to engage in dialogue about differences, commonalities, hopes, and visions in this spectrum of politics that's liberal, left, radical, progressive, revolutionary. You've got this mix of many people that come together, and year after year, the conference, or the gathering and convergence, as I call it, has gotten bigger with 1,200 plus speakers and workshop facilitators this time, infusing energy over a period of 3 days throughout the conference. The combination of that many facilitators, speakers, keynote address, and others, with about 5,000 people who came, is a real, as you said earlier, the synergy is quite incredible.
Absolutely.
This was May 30th through June 1st, right at the beginning of the month, right across the street. Ashley Abbott is here, and she was one of the many responsible for the pre-conference organizing and building of the whole base of volunteers. This is a
very important work.
This is an all volunteer, all in kind based project emanating out of the CUNY Graduate Center in terms of where it's organized year round, but then held in universities and other locations.
Pace for a while, didn't you? Or sometimes you were at Pace University?
Ashley, you were at the Pace location.
Oh, were you at Pace? Yeah.
I was.
Introduce yourself, please.
Okay.
Ashley.
So I'm Ashley Abbott, and but yes, like you said, I was at Pace for 2013. I was not doing the coordination at all as a volunteer. However, it was my first year helping out as an on-site volunteer, which we also had in the neighborhood of 250 on-site volunteers who would sign up on the day of the conference, who really helped us run everything. And the people who you went up, you registered, that was an on-site volunteer. So when we say it's volunteer, when it's really manned by a lot of volunteers, we mean it. And that's what I did in 2013.
Good for you. Okay.
Yeah,
that would have been down at Pace.
That was down at Pace.
Yeah, I was there. I was there at the thing. It came out very well. Then it seemed to me, although it seemed to me you're getting it more and more together all the time. That's something we want to talk about. The continuing impetus to what you're trying to do. And we're going to talk to some things that are in the works, and we want to talk about that. But thank you for all that work that apparently is going to continue with Seth and others, right?
It was amazing.
Yeah. Well, just a quick thing. You're at university, or you're at university. I think we spoke on the phone, or.
Well, I went to New York University, School of Social Work.
Right.
It's a work in progress. I'm finishing up a few papers, but hopefully I will be done with that very soon. Okay. Yeah, NYU is a good school. I think there's a lot of good stuff going on. Okay, well, that's very good. So anyway, Seth, thank you for that. We'll just be talking for an hour now about it. And set me straight, Seth. This was a success,
And it was, as I say, we had a panel, I had a panel there were these panels and everything, and it worked off. And I don't know how you organized, it made D-Day look easy, you know. I mean, it was so many people, it seemed. And walking inside of the John Jay, it's across the street, it seemed to me like I was walking in the middle of an aircraft carrier. It's so big, it goes all the way from 10th, the whole block, from 10th Avenue to 11th Avenue. Yes. That's a major new facility in New York City, the John Jay. It's only been open a couple of years, I think. But it's gigantic. Does it feel that way to you?
Yeah, it's quite conducive to socializing, network building, greeting old friends, you know, that open space of the atrium, the lobby, and other areas was built by architects who I think had a lot of thought about how do crowds, large groups of people best interact to get the most out of space and place. Compared to Pace, Pace was for 5 years where Left Forum was held, and each year it got bigger. It was a great location right there at the Brooklyn Bridge and City Hall Park, and you know, all of the connections that were built over the years at Left Forum at Pace include great highlights. For example, Michael Moore came the year right after the occupation, a few blocks away from Pace, and he brought that spirit with him. What he said from the stage.
Great guy.
It's very funny, you know.
Yeah, very funny.
Michael Moore, he basically humor in politics
it's so important.
The salvation of politics on this left spectrum.
If not on the whole planet. I mean, right.
If one can't be funny, whether it's satire or sarcasm or straight out loving humor, I think the we's that form in the left spectrum are probably in trouble.
Quite right. Well, I find that the case. I've been around a long time. I'm older. And I met a lot of good people. I always find, it seems to me like Stokely. Knew Stokely. We were good friends, and a lot of other people. And I find that the people that are really, you know, or you just met Paul Levinson. I just did a program with him. It will have aired Tuesday of the week when you're going to air on Thursday. He's leading edge in terms of understanding all the important implications of the digitization of the planet, which is underlying all the political things that are going on, or bringing cause or understanding cause for the political dimensions of what are going on. Anyway, but they always have a really good home sense of humor. Always, you know.
As you said,
I remember them more for the humor than all the erudite things that they said.
That's wonderful.
Often.
So Michael Moore came back the next year, and Left Forum is in some ways like a home. He did stand up with other comedians who did various workshops at Left Forum over the years. So comedy and humor are, you know, sort of one of the very important things. Art, music, other things happen at this forum, which are very unusual and not always, you know, seen in sort of the broader public. The stand-up that Michael did on the stage, including bringing, you know, occupiers and others up to.
That was back when the Occupy was actually in the square and everything.
Well, it was right after. It was the 6th anniversary.
After the invasion,
you know, it was something that, among other things, he exhorted the crowd not just to laugh at themselves and with him, but he also said, let's go out to the square. Let's join people who are celebrating the 6 months. And indeed, that happened. It was a revelry of many sorts, because when I even walked up there, people were dancing up in Zuccotti. They're having a lot of fun.
We used to have it down. What was the school? What's the one downtown where they used to have the Socialist Conference? It was the Manhattan
Borough of Manhattan Community College,
down on
BMCC.
Chambers. Right. I used to go down there. I used to dance my head off. I remember, and there was a lot of mixing and everything. It was a social event as well as a political one, you know, and everything like that. But anyway, it was really good. But now what you're thinking, what we want to bring up today is, and this is why we called this conference, I got to think that you're thinking of setting up an ongoing kind of thing. Let's not just have this be a thing that happens for a week and you have to wait another year, but there's some activity that can be organized off the success of what this Left Forum has come to be on a continuing basis and get some institutional roots behind what's going on and be doing things all through the year perhaps and have a real force and effective force, a more effective force on society at all levels, right?
Absolutely.
Good idea. Ashley, talk to it.
Many discussions about this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna, it's like you said, it's branching out. It's kind of making Left Forum not just a single forum, but a year-long occurrence. It's something that has momentum. It's expanding the momentum of it. It's from branching out to classes, for example. It'll have passed by the time this airs, but for example, tonight would be the first class that Left Forum is joint sponsoring at Judson Memorial Church.
Great place, great place.
It's Rick Wolf's, is it monthly economic update?
Yeah.
And it's the first kind of non-Left Forum thing we're reaching out and expanding to
sponsor. Did you say you're sponsoring that event at the church, and Richard Wolf is agreeing with it and are part of the whole thing, right?
Yeah, it's a joint
And there could
sponsor.
be other things. That's a venue. You need a venue, right? You need a venue for that. That requires sometimes, I don't mean, let's get into the weeds a little bit, or the reality. Mother's milk, the mother's milk of politics, somebody said wisely. I think it was Socrates or something. But, you know, it's been, so the money and the financial thing is a thing that's a difficulty very often, particularly for good causes. So the church is providing a space. Do you have a contractual relationship? Are you going to be developing, will you be able to start structuring things in a contractually meaningful way where there's some compensation and that sort of thing, like a corporation or an ongoing institution, maybe 5 months in advance for some major speakers? Are you getting to where you can really set it up as a place where you have a venue for somebody of note on an ongoing basis? You can have a schedule 4 or 5 weeks, months out, and so forth. How well along is the institutional structuring and the means of supporting the institutional structuring being realized at the places where you all get together and figure out what you're going to be doing? Either one of you can pick it up.
I think that's still developing. I think Seth can speak to that probably a little better than I can.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, yeah.
These are profoundly important questions.
Yeah.
They're questions of organizational structure and coherence in terms of social movements and political movements in the life of politics in the U.S.
Yeah, okay,
in many ways, to answer it, because the question of how does politics, culture, expressions that are more on the egalitarian side, more on the side of tolerance and liberty, how do those interact with existing institutions where forms of money or the ways that we empower each other to give our labor and give our time and build the sort of material support base are very much colonized.
Right, okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
So this is a context where the question of political, social, cultural organization in vast spectrums and communities of people is one of a question of crisis. That is the lack of material and monetary support for so much that emerges of expressions of justice-seeking individuals, movements, and groups.
Worthwhile concern and intellectual enterprise, and concern. Human love and things like that seem to go by the boards when it comes down to money.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, these are ethical questions, but these are also organizational questions, and they come home to roost in the very question you put forth of, well, Left Forum is sustained for 10 years. How is it sustained organization? How does it fit within a larger milieu of people who are willing to give a few dollars as students or so forth to attend it, when a hope would be for it to be so open that it would be porous and free in many ways.
Right, there may be a number of venues that you could actually set up a relationship with that want to be part of a larger movement that's linked into larger movements of people who want to be linked in to larger movements of all of that, because it's blowing in the wind, Bobby Dylan said, it still is. And you might be able to link it up organizationally with people who have a venue. They would welcome you to be there, and you wouldn't have to get into the money thing.
Yeah.
Is that possible to function that way in this society or not? You do have some practical realities you have to deal with, right? You had them at the center.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean at the annual event. So talk about these things in a material way or a realistic way in terms of the way the real world is set up.
Well, first of all, Harold, it's a beautiful metaphor. Bob Dylan's blowing, the answer, my friends, is blowing in the wind. In other words, it's not so certain that we can grasp at the ambiguity and the struggles to be political, to be expressive, to be willing to take...
Be creative,
to
even.
Be
to
creative.
be creative. The whole
Absolutely.
creative community is very up against the same kind of thing, it seems to me.
There are challenges.
Theatrical people and everything. All the things that are most valuable have the least, cachet in the ordinary world in which everything's put down to the bottom line.
There's no doubt that money and monetary matters quantized, that is, put in a numbers form, other forms of expression, and both limited in power forms of expression. So when it comes to what Left Forum does and its the idea of its whole volunteer base and its in-kind support, moving to Judson and having programs and classes sponsored there, having initiative to do events like workshops that Ashley can talk about and so forth in an ongoing way. There's always this balance and challenge that to move in an in-kind and a mutually supportive way cannot ignore the conditions of monetary legitimation in all that we do. So while we could say, wouldn't it be great if there were big forms of monetary support for the type of projects that come through? 1,200 projects come through Left Forum each year in the sense of what's going, and the type of need of all of those to be really supported both in the in-kind and in the monetary way is a major challenge. And Left Forum is one of those places that can uplift and call out because it has reach, your program and many others that cover it. It has and can because it's a convergent reach out into the forms of means of communication to say, all of these endeavors and projects, Left Forum included, are so worthy of forms of monetary support, as hard as it is now to give and develop that support. So these are really profound questions.
Well, they are, and what I'm talking about is how let's put that aside for a minute. How can you build a business model to become another big Las Vegas or something? I mean, put that aside for a while and just take it at the realm of understanding the reality. I just had a talk with one of my colleagues here today. I'm very concerned about the state of the world as we talk. What's the date today? The 9th of what's the month?
July.
July, and the year is
2014.
Thank you, 14. I'm very concerned about the state of the world. At the moment, I'm very worried about what's going on in Gaza. Do you read the news? It looks very, very threatening. You got the ISIL there going and everything. And then there's all these other kinds of inappropriate kinds of things that are going on. There's a deadlock in our Congress. Our Representative Boehner is wanting to sue the President of the United States. There's dysfunction all over. There's a lot of discontent, and the students are coming out with huge debt. There's a lot of problems and everything, but there's also a growing desire on the part of greater numbers of people at all levels of society to do something, or if there is something to be done, what can be done? What is the reality? What can be done? And how can we get about being able to do that which can be done within the context that exists, right? So in that context, are there people within the churches or social organizations that you would be able to work with where you could do it voluntarily? Like, could I sing the praises of where we are now? This place is called Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And this was started, it goes back about 1970 or so when cable was just coming in. This is about communication. And it was started by, one of the major founding fathers was George Stoney, who helped set it up institutionally. And it's supported by the cable industry. This is a private sector cable industry that exists, huge business interests and everything, and is supported on a 10-year franchise basis in order to provide telecommunications capability to the people of Manhattan, in our case. And there's one in Brooklyn, there's one in the Bronx, and there's 3,000 across the country. And it's supported an agreement that has been lived up to by the cable industry for, on a 10-year basis, of paying a franchise to them to set up this institution. And so all the capital costs and the operating costs for here, and it's quite generous. Not as generous as it might become, but it's very generous. And so it makes it possible for the production of television, which would cost you maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to do, to be done by the producer who comes here to take advantage of this, who is on the public. And they don't have to think about money at all. All they have to think about are the ideas, and it's a venue for free expression. And there are 3,000 across the country. It's something you all should not lose track of, nor should we lose track of the fact that there's a lot of discontent growing to a very fever pitch all across this country and this world. So there's a lot of people concerned with the issues that the Left Forum is. Yeah. And aren't there places where there could be worked out, I'm just questioning, people who are organized, churches, other kinds of things, in the case of Manhattan Network, communication, and other lodge halls, other things like that, where you could work out a pretty effective schedule, all based upon and avoiding the pitfalls of trying to get a grant from some corporate places where they have all the money. Could you work within the voluntary context to get the spirit and the effective thrust of what you're trying to do within a volunteer context? Is what I'm getting at. Now, maybe that is idealism or something, but do you understand what I'm saying? Universities might have outreach things where they can make their auditorium available or something like that. How much is that realistic, or is that just blowing in the wind nonsense on my part?
It's wonderful that you're, in a way, riffing on this idea of both the, one can be a bit circumspect and pessimistic of potentials for the public sector, for the communities to have voice that you're expressing, but here you are, MNN and the as you say, thousands of other public access studios and so forth
across the country. Yeah, that's quite amazing. There's about 3,000, but they're being challenged by a lot of bean counters. You understand? So there's a dynamic always between human beings, you know, visionaries and bean counters. So it's being challenged, but it does exist, and it ought to be made aware of by your coterie. Yeah. You should be aware of that, because that's important. The communication is important. Okay? The idea, not only the event, but the communicating of the event is important. Yeah.
The idea of Left Forum joining this idea of the concept of left and forum, dialogue, discussion, airing of differences, places to talk, is in a way manifest here at MNN and elsewhere, and Left Forum is open in that way of a convergence when it comes together, but also year-round, as we're talking about, in this voluntary spirit. These forums can take place in other parts of the country, and that's part of the concept with opening this dialogue, where it's not apparent to most people that it's not just quote-unquote market forces that empower open discussion. Matter of fact, they don't empower open discussion.
To me, there's not hardly anything going.
That's right. Even the schools, you know, in the move towards a neoliberal corporatist model, are limiting political, social, cultural types of discussion for transforming communities to better places.
Even educational institutions, they seem to be just thinking. I saw a thing about Phoenix. It was on the thing, was a thing, the big thing. And what it's about is training people to get a certificate that will give them a chance to get a job to make money. Yeah. It's all about making money because we don't have an economic system of distributing demand other than through wage slavery. Yeah. Okay? That's a major problem confronting humanity, I think. So the students come out with a huge debt. But what about the educational institutions? They have rooms, they have things. Can something be worked out between y'all? I know Stanley's involved and other people, you know, so how far can you go on a volunteer basis to keep the spirit of Left Forum going on an institutionally meaningful, or, you know, a meaningful basis in a voluntary context?
It's amazing how it's built out and how people come together over the years. And
very often the best things happen that way.
You've seen that in terms of how people come together, how the universities, faculties, and others are put into this because they want to see it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, if you just think of, you know, in our experience of organizing, we see resources opened up within the CUNY system and beyond, so that that volunteer spirit is really strong at so many levels.
Yeah, they could make available an auditorium.
And I think
3 months out for a major speaker. You schedule it in, no cost. It's part of their budget. It's there. It's there. You know what I'm saying? And they could become part of the spirit of the thing. Is that idealistically impossible, or could it work? Are there enough people who are concerned as you are? I think there are a lot of people who are concerned with the issues you're concerned with, don't you?
Yeah.
And it's growing, and it's going to grow, because there's these. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry. Actually, we sort of threw it over to you. What do you think are the possibilities of getting a sense of volunteerism? I guess that would be institutional volunteerism, beyond just individual volunteerism. There could be a chance to get something major going. There could be a model across the country or something. It could happen in California, that kind of thing. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I think also beyond just the financial resources and within the institution and getting space and so forth, Seth talked about the community that comes together. Particularly, I recognized it at the one conference I was a big part of, this past month, Left Forum 2014. Yeah. I mean, I can think of a student government person that we met, and like building connections in that way.
Connected with John Jay?
Yeah, okay. A wonderful young woman who we met who was volunteering with another thing going on there, just starting talking. I mean, like she said, I would love to be a part of this. And so building communities, I know, can be nothing but helpful. As far as the space issue goes, I don't think that's something I would be good to speak to, because I'm not sure. Well,
not you. It would be, you'd be working with Seth or somebody that could do it. But what I'm saying, what I was trying to do was to keep it away from having to go to the corporate trough. Maybe, you know. I don't know. Or try. We can't do anything because we can't get the damn grant approved. You know, that kind of thinking. We're stuck here on this street corner, but there are possibilities within the volunteer context that exist and has emerged. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just rambling around with thoughts. You know.
The issue of public space, you know, is, by the way, discussed by large groups and individuals at Left Forum. There are movements like Right to the City, which David Harvey and Rob Robinson and other folks around the country started, that helped feed into the Occupy movements and the others that basically were demanding that public space, that the streets, the sidewalks, the public squares, the museums, the parks be rethought, reconceptualized, and politicized, in the sense that the encroaching move of finance capital in this case, as well as real estate capital, to partition off and control ever more of the breathing space of human beings, literally, and place to place, needs to have the type of coalition and movement buildings that can overturn that in their communities. Assembly forms that we saw in Occupy and elsewhere, where the public come together. This is throughout the world now, whether it's Greece, Spain, Portugal, Latin America, the type of movement assemblies of people in their communities that meet to retake and consider what it means and what they're up against to claim public spaces as public and not privatized, is part of a larger context in which Left Forum, within, whether it's at a church location or whether it's at a school or whether it's in an open space, has to contend with. It's impossible to, as you said, is idealistic to to think about this outside of this context and those politics that are very skewed away from anything but presenting larger and larger amounts of capital, not just money, but capital, to be able to situate oneself even in a single location. Left Forum is no exception, although that volunteer spirit is quite amazing. And that is, if we look below the surface too of the things that you're implicating so wonderfully, that on the one hand you can look at world events from a certain bird's eye view and say what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Israel, what's happening also in wars breaking out and continuing. Iraq may lead us to pessimism, but then what's less funded and less in this sort of world of accumulation of quantified values or money and capital are just hundreds of millions of community and movements all over the world, which don't get the type of attention were it not for MNN, were it not for the Left Forum and other forums, were it not for the social movements that are raising these to the type of pitch where they're not quitting. We talked last time about some of the concrete movements in the U.S. that are happening, and you can't even count them on 1,000 hands. There are so many, whether it's worker centers or jobs with justice in the realm of just union struggles and radicalization, or it's within the environmental movements. The questions for community organizers and social justice organizers too are as relevant as struggling against the abuse of immigration and immigrants' rights as they are struggling for clean drinking water in Bolivia and elsewhere. I mean, the things we've talked about that are brought to Left Forum, the thousands of sort of great stories that are manifest are not going to be on prime time. Hopefully one day, though, as the MNNs and the public access stations and so forth pull more attention to these issues, the coalescing and the question of organization comes forth too. That is, what forms of unity are emerging within communities, within cities, within the U.S. that may present alternatives to the institutionalized power elite in the big parties, as well as in the military, in the institutions of government, and in the institutions of capitalist corporations.
Let me bring up something else. Why do you call it Left Forum? Why don't we just call it the Forum? Why do you call it left? What does that connote? What does that mean that have practical significance? Why left?
Right. I'm saying right, but I don't mean right.
No, I understand. I get the joke. I get the joke.
Right.
You could do shtick, brother, if you had to.
Thinking about this, that's a major challenge.
Why not just the Forum?
Why not just the Forum?
Yeah, right. Well, is it fair to ask her?
Well, I think I just want to just throwing it around.
You're just trying to avoid it.
That's true.
Well, okay, that's good.
One of those tough questions, but I
passing the buck is an admirable thing in many men's lives. They'd do better if they could learn how to do that better, don't you think? Yeah. No.
Well, I think Left Forum, I can't really speak to why it was decided to call it Left Forum, but I think Left Forum also brings together a lot of people who are socially justice minded, coming together, and there's a problem, I would say, that with some fragmentation across the left, and by saying Left Forum, we're bringing all these groups together, all these groups that oftentimes might focus a little bit more on their differences than their similarities, and by saying Left Forum, they're coming together, they're convening in a space where they can interact, whether it's going on in the panels, whether it's going on in the hallways. These people can come together and speak with each other and talk to each other and envision with each other, and it's
okay. Let me restate the question. Why couldn't we call it the Concerned Citizens Forum? I mean, why? There is a history, and there's language matters, words matter, to the left. Okay, you're limiting it to you're limiting the critique of society, which is becoming generalized now. There's going to be they're coming to political dysfunction in the Congress. I mean, you've got concerned citizens. Why don't we just call it the concerned citizens function or the citizens function? I mean, why the left?
Right.
I get back to it because there's not just people who are left that are concerned. That's what I'm getting at. You'd have a wider constituency, and why don't we consider it out? There might even be a couple of bankers who are concerned, and they're concerned on their own terms, and why don't we make it so that we might be able to talk to them a little bit, even if we have to hoist them on their own petard about not being able to distribute demand effectively, which is everybody's reading at the White House and everywhere else. They got concerns. Why not take it to where we can sort of understand things in a more comprehensive context than a parochial one?
So, Harold, there's no reason why the bankers and the others you speak about would not come to a left forum and address issues and debate and open up dialogue. And that's
I don't see
that's
them
the
very
tip of the
many.
iceberg.
They're mostly people with a set agenda of calling all those people the enemy to be attacked. That's the way I found it.
Well, I
hear
that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
I've done this this is my 7th year, and it's
Getting
really
the hang of it?
It's really, yeah, I think so by now. But I find it quite to the contrary.
Okay,
the plurality of views from libertarians and others, the differences that are manifest and respected at Left Forum time and again, not just because there's always room for group dialogue, participation of all the participants, well, even within workshops and so forth, but also because there's a sense of the ecumenical quality of coming together to this forum, that it combines these two concepts of dialogue and left. But Harold, one of the important things
well, that's all within one. Ecumenical means inclusive. Why don't you have bankers? Why don't you have Republicans? Why don't you have people that are you're attacking?
These are the points.
I mean, I'm not sure that's the most adequate way to get at solving the world's problems by being parochial.
In some ways, Harold, I think you're almost complimenting too much what Left Forum is. You're giving it almost too much responsibility. Let's draw down a little bit to less. There are multiple places. The idea of a forum, which you said, or Left Forum, being mutually exclusive, that is, that it's providing all the answers and so forth, rather than interconnected in networks to all other forums, is in many respects, Left Forum is a place where it is not exclusive of other forums. If there are concerned citizens forums and so forth, or left-right forums, that's fine. There's nothing. There's no mutual exclusivity about that. However, over time, it is important to deal with the challenge. I think the wonderful challenge you're making, and it's one of, in a sense, radical pluralism. That is, why can't we all get along all together, regardless of our background and political affiliations, to work out matters that are at such a critical stage that we really need to do something? Now, that's a great.
When you say all, do you mean all?
That's a great concept. Well, that's what I think you're appealing to.
Well, no, I'm just saying it.
So, Harold, let's just take the movements.
I think somewhere we're going to, at some point, humanity's going to have to get to that. Beyond, I don't know, may I say it, beyond the political, beyond the thinking about the, the immediate terms by which the political process is. The political process itself is breaking down.
Right.
It's all this digitization's going on. It's social media. There are major changes going on, and the old political dialectics, much less dialectical materialism and all that, it's all breaking down. And so you got to have an outreach, an ecumenical outreach. We got Francis now as our Pope. Francis of Assisi. There's signs. But what I'm trying to say is, it's a larger, an ecumenical forum.
So let's
take something that is not parochial.
Yeah. Let's take the emergence in the U.S. relatively late compared to in Spain and so forth of the General Assemblies, the consensus forum of decision-making in politics that the 1,000 Occupy encampments brought forth.
How about Mondragon in Spain?
Was something that was, Mondragon is also in some ways moving something called horizontalism, or a more even equality in political voice. If you take the General Assemblies and the forums, which were emergent, by the way. Left Forum had General Assembly, and it had other forums after this, the Occupy movement.
But so does the Republican caucus in the Congress have a forum of all those people. They're all sequestered. The Curia, they're all sequestered within their own limit.
And they are profoundly hierarchical compared to the structures which you're appealing to in a certain pluralism.
Well, no, why can't the mindset.
The idea of why can't we all participate was actually structured at the Liberty Plaza, aka Zuccotti Park, and throughout the country, structured so that every person got an exactly equal amount of time to deliberate and speak. Every voice was heard in these structures, these horizontal structures, which were not just at the plazas, but they were moving into the Department of Education, moving into Harlem, moving into other places where you would hear all voices making decisions on matters. And you know which direction's fascinating this pluralism, which I think you're appealing to, was going. It was going to breaking down hierarchies at the base of all the institutions. Left Forum is just one of many places that gives voice to this anti-authoritarian moment, this moment that says we would have a lot better world if all voices were heard, structured in a way that equalizes the time for turn-taking. The representative forms of government that are now so pyramidic in their elite shapes do not give people any real substantive participation and control and say-so over what happens. Why take a stand for a different type of politics, which I'm leading to my answer of why Left Forum. Why take a stand that this horizontal politics is profoundly more important at this point in time for world communities, for local communities, than the hierarchical representative form, not to exclude the other form, but hopefully to see it transform. There are times when it's important in the liberal imagination to take a stand, and utilizing the word left is many people are saying, look, this is a beacon to attract people of a certain imagination.
It's got a proud tradition.
It's time. There are times to take a stance where it is important, and it's not the only exclusive one. But this is one where if the social movements, the political movements on this spectrum of liberal to revolutionary want to start thinking about unifying, as you were saying, which is sort of to Ashley's point, here's where a stand is taken. And yet it's an open stand too. So it has that forum element, which, as Ashley said, with the great fragmentation in political movements leftward bound today, Lord knows the need for dialogue and understanding differences and working out in substantive ways in times the voices of many people to be empowered. Taking those stands, a Left Forum attracts many people. We could say a left-right dichotomy may be problematic, but if you realize the way the term left has emerged in this world, whether it's the Die Linke Party in Germany, the Left Party, or it's the sense of left in Latin America, which is very large in both parties as well as the social movements and the many dispossessed movements. The word left does not have just one connotation. It's different. It emerged in some ways, if you think about last century and the organization of the socialists and the populists through the turn of the 20th century, the emergence of the communist movement, so influenced by the European experience, taking on these terms, communism, socialism, and anarchism at those times. They may have been branded more unilinear, and it only meant this. It only meant, as we've talked before, the labor theory of value and sort of the, but no, it didn't. In some ways, those movements dissipated and had their problems and limitations over the course of the whole century. This concept of left as a unifying concept has emerged, and it's not any one or another thing, but it is a beacon to a lot of human beings in this world that they will have participation in not just their daily work and their workplace, but in state, government, politics, and community. And it has a broad meaning.
By which they can address the universal angst that's emerging in the planet as a whole.
Absolutely.
We're going through a lot. I hear what you're saying. It's got a proud tradition, and it's a It's a thing that like a marketer would understand, to sell cornflakes rather than Wheaties. And you got a built-in market, and it's got, all those advantages and everything. You don't think it's a little limited. What would it be for the people? Well, you're saying you represent, in a certain sense, you would say to the Rod, you represent the spirit of justice and freedom and democracy that could be expended to all to have a really universally just system. And the other side represents the evil forces that are preventing that from happening. That's sort of a thing that's inherent in the dialectical materialism.
But you're sort of contextualizing as you this and that.
No.
And the thing is, the diffusion, the loss of the we and the you and the us versus them is not a bad thing. In many ways, the breakup of us versus them, which we could call certain models of political organizing that may be associated with left, is one of those manifestations that there are places and times that, at least in my opinion, for the we's, the us to emerge. But a left forum and an Occupy and the social justice movements that I've been talking about, and Ashley also we can talk about, generally are much more self-critical about how the us and the them, the we and the you, the enemy and friend, and see it, as you say, dialectically as much more of a tapestry where even the libertarian and the liberal sparks of life have so many potentials to become more coalescent and more manifest in points of transformation of conditions.
Okay, if this group of people got real power, and you can do that against a power structure that exists, and you can hear it understood, and the concentration of wealth and power has become obscenely concentrated. I think it's always been that way throughout all of history, and it's been concentrated in a period, but it's become more so than ever. That book that everybody at the political class and otherwise is reading, Getty's or somebody, he's got the book, the income differentiation between the mass of the people and the super rich is absolutely, totally, unworkably obscene. Now, they've got a system. How do you deal with that? What do you say to them that have that position? I could make an argument that they are not at fault, but the left is at fault for the fact that this condition exists, and that you should be able to bring them in. You should be able to hoist the system in place on its own petard, according to Mr. William Shakespeare in terms of the Battle of Algiers. That means they've got a claim to say, and there are lots of claims, the world works. We got penicillin, there's been advance, we got television, we got clean water, we got a lot of advancements that have come, a good deal of which has come through the private sector. You have a private sector, and they've done a great deal of that. And if you were to hoist them on the own petard, they're being hoisted on it. And why the left isn't paying attention to it, I don't know. The major problem is the whole digitization and the whole process of production is going to robotization. And the whole and it can be, it's all make work things in order to keep a way of getting some buying power into the hands of the people of the world is not allowed, is through jobs. And I'm sorry, if you think that having a job and their identities are wrapped up in having a job, all of this kind of stuff, that's part of a historical transformation. There's got to be an alternate way. They're being hoisted on their own petard. They're all reading it. It's absurd. It's not workable, the system. So you hoist them on that petard. And in all due respect, I think the left, left, has to be hoisted on its own petard. They've got this idea of it's perfectly all right for all the capital assets to be owned by a tiny plutocratic class. We don't want anything to do with anything that's private. Let's get rid of the private sector. That's what I heard. Get rid of it. They're the bad guys. Overthrow them. They're the Hitlers or something. And that you can't have anything to do with the private sector. It's absurd in terms of reality. Why not include everybody? The left should be hoisted on its own petard, and so should the capitalism, so that you can get to something ecumenical that deals with the real issues that are going on. Then we're transforming, coming out of history with a qualitative change, not a little other section of history, a qualitative change in terms of our position in the universe. Why don't they get the large, comprehensive intellectual considerations of what's actually going up and causing the political dissent and the political upset and the political dysfunction, rather than dealing in the old way? That's all I'm saying.
You're so generous to, in some ways, empower the group that you're, describing as the left, but really, as Ashley and I have been talking about, the fragmentation of everyday life. You mentioned digitization, and I mentioned Alvin Toffler. You talked about the other sort of luminaries who talked about future shock and the breakdown of just much more coherent family, community forms of communication and understanding. We're atomized, and in some ways you're very generous to accord this sort of politics of the left as something that is unified and manifest in forms that are answerable, but really, the amount of fragmentation, and also I would not compulsively focus as much even on the term the left, because when we talk about...
Well, you've got it in the name of your thing. Rather than the form, you call it the left form. And you want to take the baggage and what goes with it.
Let me continue
by linking it to the left, rather than to the larger intellectual community that's concerned with what's really going on, rather than a truncated view of what's going on and where the problems come from.
But Harold...
Of an outdated system and way of seeing things politically only.
To compartmentalize it just as the left, when we talk about Latin America, at Left Forum, the vice president of Bolivia, Alvaro Garcia Linera, came forth and he talked about indigenous movements, and when the indigenous majorities in Bolivia actually created a revolution around the issue of against privatizing water and helped to rewrite a constitution and elect
Evo Morales.
Evo Morales and
I lived
Azul
2
Garcia.
years in Bolivia, brother. Did I tell you that? I lived among the Aymara people for 2 years in Aymara. I know Bolivia very well.
But here's the point, Harold, just speaking to it. The indigenous struggles, we're not thinking left and right. It's not necessarily the only way we have to call this the left or the right or even the social movements.
No, there's a lot of nuance
There were all forms of struggles that emerged that can be called radical, revolutionary. They can be called socialistic. In Latin America, the term socialism
Mr. Marx would have come back to, it's all having to do with materialistic arrangement of economic issues.
So there are many.
That's what it amounts to.
There are many
That's
forms.
down to the bottom line.
There are many forms of socialism and many understandings of socialism in Latin America, such that it's not one thing. It doesn't all skew around, oh, that's the socialist or that's the communist. So as I said, you are in some ways according a lot more to the idea of the left than I think is manifest. And so we emphasize, and I say we, it's just volunteers and others who help to build these convergences. We emphasize the notion of this is a place of a forum, and it's a place of a left forum, so that all of these ideas, whether it's your multiple socialisms or it's multiple forms, that's right, multiple labor theories of values, multiple punctuated equilibriums.
Like, didn't they light up the sky on 4th of July?
Because one of the things I think we are missing here is the question that you're provoking of organization, of political power. These are questions of how are these manifest? Are we so bereft? Economic, cultural power. Are the we that you're generously according to as the left, are the we's so bereft of the ways and the means to build power that all we can do is be more pessimistic and try to compartmentalize and say here are the mistakes and so forth? And at least what little answer I think I hear coming from the forum, and also even in some of the activities that are being organized year-round in the forum, is that organization, building forms of unity, respecting diversity in those unities are critical questions of our times. Out of the Occupy movement, one of the initiators, Callie Lassen, who is editor of Adbusters, and from an anti-authoritarian and situationist traditions, did the unorthodox thing of saying, hey folks, these General Assemblies are magical and amazing. They could be all over the country. But we also need a political party. We need a formation of more unity. You can make it diffuse and fill.
There's a million political parties throwing up.
That's right.
Now.
There are so many political parties.
Everybody's forming a political party.
Here, a person of the anarchist tradition is saying, you know, you've got to address electoralism. You've got to address the types of power that are very vertical in representative form. You can't ignore the institutions of the military and the police infused in the life of these institutions, and you can't ignore the consolidation of capitalist concentration in corporate sectors. And he said, in the political movements, we also need unity and a bigger political party. That was a call from an anti-authoritarian source. So, you know, in some ways, I'm very encouraged where I see in Spain the Podemos party, I see in Greece the Syriza party, I see in Germany the Die Linke and others with all the limitations and so forth, understanding that the merger of street social movement, direct action, community action, and addressing the halls of power is essential at this point in time. And where are we going to go if we're not doing that? So that's what's emerging around the world.
Well, that's good.
And it's not with the word. The left is part of it, or a left is part of it in some of these countries, but it's not the only one. There's so many more.
One of the problems in television, I'm in television, and one of the problems in television, you got this damn tyranny of time. We have run out of time. We could talk about this, maybe we should get a beer or something. We could talk about this for about 24 hours. It would do charts and everything like that. But it's very good that there was a success of that. It's a group getting together to address the problems, and there's people of concern with the human condition. There are elements that are emerging in terms of, I just think there's a larger, I guess, I don't like the politic thing. There's a larger context in which all of this is taking place. It would be nice to get at the root causes of things rather than the stories that are building up behind the political stances people are. That's my thing. The intellectuals are falling down. They've been co-opted into specialization, in my view. But what we do need is a forum where these important questions can be addressed. It was addressed well there. I think some people thought it's not right to have it a place where they're turning out policemen or they're going to impress the people and that kind of thing. There's a lot of things that come out of this criminal justice system. It's inadequate. People are prison systems for profit and all that. There's all kinds of problems. But anyway, it's a great idea that you are doing it together. And Ashley, I hope you all the very best in gathering up volunteers, and that you can get the movement growing on a regular basis so there could be discussion of the major problems that are legion in terms that are confronting the human condition. I just think there's got to be some more getting together of intellectual understanding of what's going on comprehensively beyond the political, beyond the historical. And that there's something major going on, and not another little movement like the French Revolution or something. A major change at a level that's above and encompasses everything. And we got to hoist each one that is hung up on reified institutions and thought on their own petard, so we can get at to something that's really required evolutionary in terms of our place in the universe. But that's my feeling. All the best to the Left Forum event to try to get the thing going. And I'm glad we could make some connection here at MNN, and I thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
You have no chance to say anything more because I talked and talked and talked until we're right to the very end.
Maybe we'll put the website on the thing. Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to MNN. Make it, Ashley, welcome. Your pleasure. Ashley Abbott and our friend Seth it's another Seth.
Yes.
Seth Adler. And thanks a lot for all the good work. Congratulations on it, and may the whole thing prosper and move in a good way that's going to help move the condition of the planet to a new condition that is direly needed. Okay.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you for viewing. We invite you to tune in tomorrow. We're coming back tomorrow. Thanks again both for coming in. See ya. We're back tomorrow, and thanks again until tomorrow. Thank you. So that's the end.